Hey, Thu, how are you?
I'm good, bro. What's up, Kenneth? Such an
I'm
honor to be here.
I'm good. Thank you for coming on. I start every episode with this question: what does it mean to be Vietnamese to today?
Vietnamese gives me sort of a roots and identity to who I am. Just to kind of go a little bit broader, I'm first generation Vietnamese-American, grew up in Oakland. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So the things that I represented, I didn't see in my own neighborhood. So knowing that I'm Vietnamese gives me some sort of background or backbone to know that I belong to something.
You grew up in Oakland. I grew up in Mid City, LA. I am not challenging where you grew up or where I grew up, but it's very similar. I grew up, in the '80s was all blacks, and it's strange. I talk about this all the time with my friends. I bond with the black culture. Now, looking back, I don't probably have as many black friends, but bond. How did you grow up in Oakland around black folk?
I think it's a little bit different here in the Bay Area, given the fact that a lot of my friends were Black, and still to this day, my childhood friends are Black, and we're still connected to this day. But I find the group that we exist here in Oakland, at least in my network, is fairly diverse. And but I live in this microism, if you will, in this bubble that exists in my neighborhoods and the schools that I went to. Um, Sort of illustrating that, I did see like race wars between black and white. I mean, black and Mexican and Asian and black. However, I think because I was an individual that kind of floated in between all those groups, I would say I felt that I was in a diverse bubble, if you will. And I'm not talking about different communities. I just think the group of friends that I hung out with and the things that I gravitated towards. And if anything, um, I would say, I don't know if this is a positive or a negative, but I think crime existed in every community in Oakland. It was bad in the Mexican neighborhood, it was bad in the Vietnamese neighborhood, it was bad in the Black neighborhood. Because I think universally across the board, we came from a refugee slash diaspora sort of experience. All of our parents were refugees. All of our parents were laborers, and all of us were trying to find a common struggle to make it out. Um, However, I think there are opportunities in time, like in the 90s and even now, where you see heightened criminal cases against Asian communities, against Black communities, against Mexican communities. So, and I know that's a little bit of a sensitive topic, but I
No,
mean,
no, no. I actually want to get into that because I've talked about that a lot on the show.
yeah,
Why is the Bay Area such a target of this, Asian hate?
I think it's always been there.
Oh, really?
It's always been there, bro.
Hmm.
Um, in the communities that I exist in, or the friends that I have, we didn't do that to other people of other peoples of color, other people who didn't look like us. Even though the group of friends that I had was fairly diverse, and I think that when I did see those things happen, it wasn't the people that exist in my community. And I saw it in the '90s. They were going to Chinatown or Little Vietnam Town, and it's usually a person who has undiagnosed, unbalanced mental
Mm,
health.
interesting.
In
And
the '90s, just to add to that, my apologies, bro. Just to give people some context and background, the crack epidemic height for Oakland and the Bay Area was in the '80s, and then reflected into the skyrocketed homicides and murder rates in the '90s. Because it was all fueled by drugs and the suffering and the poverty that was happening during that time, economic wise. And I see the same thing happening now in my same in this same lifetime of mine in the 2020s. Once again, rise of opioids, a opioid epidemic, and stricken poverty for a huge population of people who can't afford to live here. And I connect those two things.
mm,
I think it's unfair to blame certain groups of people. If I'm Asian and then one of my friends I grew up with that happens to be Asian or Vietnamese commits a crime, I can't be held responsible for his crime. So I think it's unreasonable to blame groups of people or hold groups of different ethnic groups responsible. And I stand by that and I speak about that openly.
Okay, so then the flip side might be addressed right now because I
Mhm.
have a question. I,
Yes.
I'm constantly wondering if this has been going on forever and it's mental
Yeah.
issues, right?
Uh-huh.
Then this whole Stop Asian Hate campaign that we're all about, right? Is it misplaced? Because are we actually addressing what we need to address? Because Stop Asian Hate means stop the violence on Asian people. But if it's been going on for all these years and now all of a sudden we're talking about it, is it really going to, are we addressing the real problem that's
So this
happening?
is so that's the thing, that that question that you're asking me is asking for a singular solution to that, and it's not a singular solution. So this issue has always happened. Mental health is a big thing. Social media has heightened people's mental health imbalances. And it's in addition to the pandemic getting people more stressed out, more mentally unbalanced, you have people like Trump corralling people's emotions to kind of direct it towards the Asian community. So Stop Asian Hate isn't just about something that's always been happening. It's targeting specifically something that's been heightening in 2020. Is the fact that we had the leader of our nation, our own communities, our own government bodies, specifically targeting us, and they're basically trying to erase us. As when I say us, it's people of color, it's Asian people, and I feel like the same is happening with the Black community. So I think specifically when we talk about Stop Asian Hate, it's the root of it is through white supremacy and Donald Trump fuel, my strong opinions. And I think there's a lot of, to be factual as well too, there's a lot of Vietnamese Americans who don't agree with me in that regard. However, that's my truth. That's what my experiences are. I'm a 36-year-old man, and I stand by my truths from how I see it.
Yeah. And I think by straddling, for me, to comment on that, by straddling sort of the world of Vietnamese people with a little bit of money and then being part of the street culture that I grew up in,
Mhm.
you could see, and I'm sure you can share with this experience, you could see why the Vietnamese community is so divided, right? It's something that is not really spoken about because the two sides, it's very difficult for the two sides to sit down and have a conversation about this stuff. It's just very difficult to sit with our parents and or their friends to have a discussion.
So I think being Vietnamese, I hope you can agree with this, is that there's generational differences within Vietnamese diaspora, older, young, first generation, third, fourth generation, right? There's that. And in addition to that, there's political division, where we grew up in a democratized community. Our parents, our parents, just say the differences in our parents' generation or even our grandparents' generation, those who refugeed over here, there's a division between the North and the South, and that's a historical difference that's been around for hundreds of years. And I think because we come from a root country history where whether it's us or our parents, there's always been this sense of division. I think it's very difficult to find unity here in the United States as Vietnamese Americans and representing each other. Um, However, it doesn't slow down my efforts, my other friends' efforts, other people in the Vietnamese community space to kind of like corral a singular narrative to kind of help unify all of us to identify as one. Because when you have a strong community together, you're not just having each other's backs, but you're sharing each other's resources. You're empowering each other. You're uplifting each other. You're voicing each other's voices. And I think I don't think that's a unique issue that we experience here in the Vietnamese-American sort of narrative. I think that exists in other communities as well. People of Middle Eastern descent, whether they're, um, whether it's the Israeli conflict or Palestinian conflict or Ethiopian or even Ghana or whatever it is, or being Korean, the divide between North and the South. China, for those who are more pro um, democracy versus the existing modern communist government that they have now. Not to say that one's worse than the other, but there's those political divides.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Holy
I,
shit, man! I thought we were gonna talk about food for the next 2 hours or hour and a half, and we're cutting it up, chopping it up. I love
well,
it.
that's the thing that I kind of fell into a little bit is that the more I studied food, the more I started learning about people.
Mm,
You can't study food without the history.
love that.
You see what I'm
Love it.
saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's true. And when I have watched all the episodes and stuff that you're in, I notice a certain um, ability to articulate these thoughts, your ideas, and typically people in the kitchen, we're I've worked in the kitchen space for 10 years, and I understand it's normally we're not thinking about these kind of thoughts and the theories, or like sort of like the theories about making the food. Where did you get this? Where did you sort of understand this way to explain things?
that's a great question, bro. I'm not a college graduate. I didn't go to college. Right after high school, I wanted to be a chef, so I went to culinary school. And within that, I really lacked the ability to write and speak. And it took me a few years to go down the road, getting into management positions and learning that I lacked ways to express myself,
Mm,
articulate things, to manage a team. And oftentimes, because I lacked those abilities to articulate, it translated into frustration, whether with my team and whether with myself. And thanks to at the time, I happened to be a GM. I wanted to I wanted to step out of the kitchen, learn how to GM and do front of house stuff. I worked at Saul's Deli, which is a Jewish delicatessen in North Berkeley, like super random. But the owners approached me and they loved my passion and my ability to work. However, I lacked leadership and speaking abilities. And it's through their recommendation that I learned how to speak and write. So I think first is to learn how to speak. Through their suggestion, I started taking Toastmaster classes. So I'm like this tatted up kid. Everyone in the Toastmasters club. By the way, Toastmasters is a nonprofit club that you can find in almost any library in the nation. There's like thousands of them all over the nation, and people who are passionate volunteer their time to teach other people how to speak. So it's usually a room full of retired CEOs, white, like in their 60s and 70s, and they're super passionate about speaking. I went in there with a notebook and notepad, made friends with a bunch of old people, and through the
mhm.
course of the months, I learned how to speak. So I did it in a formal way, and
Now
it's
you all make sense. You make sense to me now. I to completely see where this is going.
and then that kind of just translated into other things. I started doing pop-ups, and at the pop-ups that I was doing, pop-ups are underground. Here in the Bay Area, pop-ups are underground dinner parties. Play 80s, 90s R&B, hip hop, all that stuff, and do a tasting menu in an informal space, whether it's garage or like a closed restaurant, whatever it is. Um, but the food that I was cooking was Vietnamese food as the way my mom experienced it as a refugee woman, and people didn't know what the hell they were eating. So naturally, I had to stand in front of people's tables and
Mm,
tell them what the fuck they were eating, so they
mm,
couldn't talk shit. And that thing led to another thing. By doing that, I met some media folks that were like, "Wow, you're a great storyteller. Let's do a commercial." From doing a commercial led to like doing a short film. From doing a short film, people started inviting me to colleges to speak. I did the Art Institute. They invited me to be like the graduation speaker, which is crazy. I didn't. People invited me into classrooms. I've been invited into prison to speak. So I feel that, and just for the record, like I have this sort of imposter syndrome sort of vibe, because I grew up in Oakland, and I felt that, um, even though I wanted to be an academic in my adolescence, I just wasn't. I never felt smart enough. And just it's just very interesting how, um, I think I went more towards people's suggestions than my own thought that I was great at something. And it wasn't until recently where I felt that I, can speak and write, not eloquently, that's the wrong word, but at a and articulate in a way that would impact people. And you know, I find many blessings in that, but I think also is that maybe it's because I have never blew smoke up my own ass. Maybe that provided my field to take things more seriously and study more and read more and that's my approach for a lot of things is that you know I remove the pride out of myself. I remove the the opportunity to feel humiliated when people are trying to teach me something. I remove all of that and I act as if I'm a 5-year-old and I ask a fuck ton of questions. And I think by me removing that from my life, I've found that I've been able to learn a lot better. And, you know, I think this is an old saying, like, you know, if you would just shut the fuck up and listen, you will learn a lot more. You know, so I think it's that sort of perspective that I've learned to embrace that has helped me in my speaking abilities. So, you know, given the fact that I didn't go to college.
Yeah, I that's one thing that stands out when, I've spent time watching you. You're really into explaining what people are tasting and what people are eating. So it's a big and then I've watched, your father and your mother both, very they came to America and they did very basic jobs, cooking and sewing and you know, I felt like when I grew up in the window coverings industry, we were making draperies and my dad and I were installing drapes and I hated being around my father's work because it was just so I just felt it was such a menial sort of like labor intensive. But watching you and your father and your interaction, and he was a cook at I think it was a hotel or a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
How did you how did you come to grips? I mean, did you ever have any embarrassment, or why would you go into your father's? And I'm asking from my own, sort of point of view. Why would you go into your father's work and his background?
I think a lot of us, people of color, specifically Vietnamese immigrants, we come from a place of self shame a lot. I find that referencing Jewish community and even the Black communities, like the people in that space that I admire, I found that they own their narratives.
Hmm.
And by owning their narratives as a community, they've been able to reclaim it. And I think I came to a point where I was looking around in my Vietnamese community, no one was really talking about the essence of being Vietnamese. In particular, my parents about the Vietnam War or the struggles that we have and exist here. Everyone was talking about, even my aunties and uncles, being luxurious, getting Gucci and Chanel when you can't afford it, you know, living in Laguna Beach, you know, when you it's really not within your means. And I felt that it took me a while to process, and I think it's thanks to my community here in Oakland and having those sort of conversations, I started to understand that you know it wasn't a lack of identity. If anything, it was the Vietnamese community attempt to assimilate to be more American, and they were trying to forget these like very deep, painful, dark scars. Even though I may look intimidating to some, I'm a big dude, tatted up, like I always have a hoodie on. But you know, I've been able to find that I engage with my Vietnamese elders, whether I know them or not, and asking sort of these beautiful questions about how they came here and what their story was. And you know, looking around in the media space, whether it's in food or Netflix or whatever else, I felt like that was such a lacking narrative that no one really talked about it. And once again, you know, like I'm referencing Jewish diaspora,
Yeah.
we Vietnamese people experience genocide. You know, if you don't call spraying Agent Orange over millions of people genocide, I don't know what the fuck you call it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
you know, like they try to exterminate us. Period. If you don't call the Khmer Rouge a genocide, which is right next to neighboring Vietnam, like there's a lot of shit that happened on the border of that, a genocide or the attempt to wipe a certain group of people out. I don't know what the fuck you call it.
Yeah.
You know, and I really related to the Jewish experience where they owned that. They were honest about it. They cried together. They came together as community, you know? And I think in the most genuine way, I yearned for that for our Vietnamese community. Because I think in hearing their story, it wasn't just a story about them. It was a story about the human experience. It was a story about suffering. And I was like, wow, my family suffered too, you know? Um,
Sound like you spent a lot of time with within the Jewish community. So, you know, obviously the Black community, but sounds like a lot of time spent with the Jewish community.
so the Jew, you know how I told you I worked at that place called Saul's Deli? It's
Yeah.
a Jewish deli in North Berkeley. That was my first exposure to the Jewish community, and they played a huge role in my life. They came into my life when I was about 23, yeah, about 23, 24 years old. And I think that's the first time that I found narrative and history that intertwined with food in the most organic way. I'm not talking about like my grandmother grew the best tomatoes. None of that bullshit. We're talking about, you know, um, I'm talking about like we were starving, and all we could eat, for a month was matzo crackers, that type of shit, you know?
Stripped down,
Um,
like keeping it really, really real.
yeah, man. And even though I'm not a Vietnamese refugee, that's what my parents were. I guess my connection with that, whether my parents want to admit it or not, it's for some or for most, it's hard to be vulnerable. But I grew up hungry like a motherfucker, bro. You know what I mean? And I had this reputation with my aunties and uncles and other family members. Every time I go over their house, I would always ask for second or thirds. I was hungry, but at the same sadness of that, and the flip side, I didn't have food at home. You know,
Why didn't you have food at home?
so I grew up in a food insecure community, if you will. My parents were both laborers, and I think you can relate to this too. No matter how poor your parents are, the fact that they made it here, they're sending money back home to Vietnam. Period.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So both my parents, given at the time they were making minimum wage, in actuality, they were probably making half of minimum wage because that wasn't their money anymore. You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's the struggle that people don't understand. They're not just taking care of themselves, but because they're children of war or war expats or war refugees, there's a whole community back home in Vietnam that's relying on them for survival. Um, so I felt that, and let me give you a reference. Let me give you an example of what poor meant to me, because everybody has different references of what poor.
Relative, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's whatever. It's perspective, right? So for me, everyone's childhood is filled with, man, my mom makes this dish, during the holiday. But bro, we didn't celebrate the holidays. Thanksgiving, we'll be lucky to celebrate. My parents aren't celebratory because we couldn't afford to be celebratory.
Right.
And the meals that I had growing up was, this is the thing that I remember. And I remember going to culinary school, and I remember crying, being upset about this shit. I felt like I feel like I didn't fit in here, bro, because all these kids got these white memories or these privileged memories of like having a dinner. I don't have anything like that, you know? My memory of food was that, so check this out. My mom used to go to the butcher market, whether it's like the Mexican grocery store nearby, the Asian one across town, whatever it is. And in those days, this back in the 90s, is that you can ask for chicken bones for free because they never sold chicken bones. They
Yeah.
used to throw chicken bones away all the time. My mom would take that home and make soup, and that was a good day when they had it. And I tell you like a sad truth for myself, bro. If we had anything on the table, it was rice. I ate so much rice. I'm talking about just rice and maybe like soy sauce and shit, not even like egg. I ate so much rice where I had to go to the doctor because my fucking stomach was plugged up and I couldn't shit for like a week. Bro, that's a lot of rice, bro. But that's what happens to you when that's just all the rice you eat, bro. And I think people, just to give people context, and I'm not asking for a sob story by any means. I'm great right now.
Yeah.
um, just to give people context, my parents are two people who suffer from PTSD, you know? So within all of this, I struggled with my parents struggled with me, and I thought it was the norm for the longest time.
Mm.
And it wasn't until when I started dating, when I started hanging out with other friends, starting meeting people from other communities outside my own that are a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
And I started to see like, wow, your family complex is so nice. You don't have 8 locks on your door. Your windows aren't nailed shut. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's all stuff that, that's the way PTSD affected my dad. Oh wow, your dad doesn't trip if, somebody closes the door too hard, you know? It wasn't until I started to see the complexes outside my own family where I started to question. I'm like, wow, there's something wrong with my family. And that's why I go so much deeper in the narrative, because I'm trying to find out why I'm here, why things are the way they are, and how things exist. Unlike other people's parents, my parents they didn't tell me anything about the war in Vietnam, you know? And finding it out later in my adult life, I'm glad that they didn't, because that shit was horrific, you
Yeah.
know?
Uh, that's why I do this podcast, because I wonder what the Vietnamese experience is all about, because it's now what I'm learning, nearly after 70 episodes so far, that it's very different for different stratas of the Vietnamese population. We have some very privileged and entitled um, sectors of our community, and then there's the hood folk that grew up in the inner city and exposed to a very different sort of life, and there's everything in between that too. But
Well, I could guarantee you this. In those communities or individuals who come from a strain of more privilege, I could guarantee you it's education, you know?
mm,
My father, you know, um
you're saying that the thing that is similar to all of them is how educated they are.
yes, I find that more privileged they are, the more educated they are. And I don't mean to belittle, but I think education gives you access to opportunity. That's just a fact, you know?
100%, yeah, 100%. That's why they push it so hard in Asian
So hard.
culture.
Yep. And just just to state a fact that my father, and by no means do I want to embarrass my father, but I think this is a truth that I feel that a lot of people should hear, is that my father is, to this day, he's illiterate. He has like a second grade reading level in Vietnamese.
Mm,
You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
Because he's been a laborer his whole life. His father died when he was like in his mid 30s, about my age. I'm 36 right now. His father died at my age right now, you know? And he, being the eldest male of the entire family, he had to go to work. And I think at that time he was maybe like 13 years old.
shit. It's a
You see,
hard
what
life.
I'm
Yeah.
so all he knows is to grunt and grind. It doesn't make him ignorant. It doesn't make him unintelligent. He just never had the opportunity to have access. And the reason why I mentioned that is because prior I mentioned that I went into San Quentin. I think I mentioned I went into San Quentin and worked with incarcerated men.
No, 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 I haven't heard. I would love to hear that.
So storytelling led me into prison to work with incarcerated men, not as a prisoner, as a civilian,
Civilian volunteer.
as a civilian volunteer, to work with incarcerated men. And I met men in there who are incredibly intelligent. They just never had access to opportunity to get
To get
educated.
educated. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's everything. It's an interesting point, because there's plenty of people that come from money but don't have that sort of mobility, the social mobility, as an educated person. Because anywhere you go, if you're an educated person, you have a lot more access.
Yeah, because you know how to analyze, you know how to articulate and express your thoughts and ideas. And all those things, just those two things combined together gives you opportunity because you're putting it out there, you know?
That's almost the most beautiful thing about being in America. I feel like the tatted up, the hoodie wearing chef that didn't go to college, but can articulate and can visualize and can eloquently put out ideas is just as equal or as powerful as somebody who studied. But that doesn't happen in other places like Asia. I feel it's different. You know, you don't get to be able to have it's changing. I'm not going to blanket statement this, but it's changing. But I think growing up, as I was going to Vietnam a lot, I realized that you're either this or you're this, but you're never both.
Yeah.
And that's something I want to talk about in the show. It's like when I see you, it's like you're both. You're able to really be able to articulate the ideas of the food, as well as really have this sort of sense of, you know, Oakland, and you own it. You own that narrative, and you know, it's a breath of fresh air. And I think in Vietnam, it's starting to happen. And
Mm.
when you have these two things, the ability to sort of be raw and you know and at the same time articulate your thoughts and have it both show, it's very fluid. It's awesome to watch.
I appreciate that. I think it might be a result of my confusion of my identity. You know, like I didn't know if I was Vietnamese because I didn't look Vietnamese. You know, I didn't know if I was part of my Oakland community because in my community I didn't look like anybody else. And I think it's sort of the mesh of the two.
Yeah.
But if anything, I encourage this for all little boys and girls, if you will, for even all adults as well too. I think the most important thing is to be yourself. I think we get overwhelmed with media a little bit too much. We watch movies or we read books and it inspires us to be a certain way. You know, like I find too often that um, my male counterparts and my male colleagues, they're trying to emulate Anthony or Bourdain or Thomas Keller, you know, or not that they're bad figures or whatnot, you know, or they try to emulate like I don't know some other cool chef that they want to be, which isn't a bad thing, but I think it's also very important to draw the line of being inspired and then being yourself.
Yeah. Well, Bourdain was a bad motherfucker though, man. He, you know, he had that sort of street sense and he kept shit real, but he was able to really
Oh,
articulate. Say it
it
again?
was oh, I said those people are great because they are themselves.
Yeah.
There won't ever be another Anthony Bourdain, and Anthony Bourdain isn't Thomas Keller
Right.
and Tupac meshed together. It just doesn't work like that. He's inspired by, but he's his own person, and he
Yeah.
had this fearlessness to be himself. And that's what I'm trying to encourage other people too. It's like it's okay to be inspired, but don't be afraid to be yourself because I think that is more unique more than anything. Because I think yourself, myself, we all have very unique stories. We just don't have to know how to tell it.
You know, I want to get into Top Chef and I want to get into all these other
Oh,
narratives.
shit.
You don't have to if you
All good. It's all good. I'm just talking shit. I'm just talking
if
shit.
you
It's good.
beating that shit, if you beating that horse to death, you know, we don't have to get into that. But
It's
what I
all
do
good. It's all good.
what I want to talk about early on right now is sort of this idea of boundaries in terms of food, right? When I think about the food landscape, sometimes I think shit, everything is so we've seen everything and we've are experiencing everything. Everything's like what's the next frontier? Like a pill that you put in your mouth and you fucking just have the rainbow, you know, a whole cornucopia of flavors. But it's not that it's not that simplistic, right? But I'm constantly figuring out and trying to talk to people in the food business, like what is what's next for you? What's the like the next frontier of food?
That's a great question. I float in this sort of like the AI and the robotic space as a consultant and an advisor, and I find a lot. I find it to be very stimulating. I think mainly because when you talk about the future and innovation, I think there's an opportunity to save humanity. You know, make things more accessible, all that stuff, etc. And I think once again with TV narratives, I think people really get carried away with it sometimes. Elon Musk is trying to scare everyone. I think I have faith in humanity. I have faith in people. I have faith in scientists. I have faith that scientists, engineers, architects, archetypes, whatever they want to call them, they will build technologies that will um, empower human beings opposed to eliminate them. It just wouldn't make sense why you would build AI or robots to um, replace us. It's complete bullshit. Like that's the stupidest thing you could ever do. That's movie bullshit to me,
Yeah.
kind of. But the smarter thing to do, and have some friends here in the Bay Area, like in the tech space, where I geek out and I talk about AI with them and all that stuff, and future robots and all that stuff. What people are trying, I think, the direction everyone is trying to gear towards is that how are we going to build technology to lengthen our lives, make us stronger, make us more prettier, make us more healthier. I think that's where AI and robotics lie. And I think where food comes into that is that we are human beings. We enjoy the experience of eating food. I'm convinced that we will never use technology to take that away from ourselves. Hence, eating a pill like Jetson style. I don't think that will ever happen. I think chefs can do that at this moment as of 2021. But I'm telling you, like, yeah, it's not going to be popping.
Yeah.
Not.
Because people still really enjoy like a fucking kicking bowl of pho that's like prepared the way the old country did it.
Yeah, and also, I think there's things where I think when you start to take that experience away from people, it starts to be dehumanizing. We're humans, and eating is such a a a human right that everyone
Yeah.
should have. You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So I don't think it'll go that sort of way. I think if anything, we'll do it to be more efficient with our farming practices, with our agriculture. Um, so that way we could be more resourceful and won't deplete our Earth's resources. And if anything, spacey type of shit, Elon Musk type of stuff, we'll learn how to do that on another planet.
Yeah. There's a book, I think the author's name is Peter Diamandis, and he wrote a book called Abundance.
Mhm.
And they talk a lot about, green power and farming techniques that are vertical,
Yep.
warehouse type stuff.
Yep.
And how we're actually getting better as the years go on with protecting the environment, all this technology of cleaning up CO2 and
Yep.
all these farming practices. So it's not as bleak as it sounds. And sometimes I think there's complex narratives that we're not really allowed to kind of get into because everything is sound bites. It's like 3 minutes, 2 minutes on the news, BBC or CNN. But when we get to talk like this, we can really get into the practice because I hope like in another year, 2 years from now, you and I can get back on this and we can talk about your AI, work and talk about, the way things have developed in the future.
Absolutely. 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 I think there's a lot of space for that, and I think we're just scratching the surface for that. By the way, I did work with a vertical farm called Plenty, and I'm telling you, the greens that they grow out of that thing, they shipped it to me via mail, or I think it was UPS. I'm not promoting UPS, by the way. Want to make that very clear.
Another level on the taste.
um, it was super crispy. I kept it in my fridge for another week, and it didn't wilt. You know, and I didn't have to wash it because they don't grow it in soil. But it was great, man. I thought it was a great product. And I think they're gonna start to do strawberries as well. And I think the great thing about that is that they can grow a lot and it's super cheap. So I think around that narrative, it's not about it's not just about having a good quality product, but it's about access. How do we innovate to make things cheaper? You know, I think this formula of doing new things and having the price go up, I think that's a dangerous path to go down. But it's like the iPhone, right? Say, for example, like mobile
Yeah.
phone, like you remember like this the super small V Star Motorola phone. I remember that came out when it first came out, it was $1,500, and
Yeah.
all I could do was dial a number. Now we have the same thing about with more technology, more offering at the same price, if not cheaper.
Yeah,
Um,
they said something about these space shuttles that used to go in the 80s up into the space. One of our iPhones is the far more advanced than the space shuttles that went up to
that's
space.
crazy, right?
Something to think about. Yeah, the computing power of an iPhone today is like many times greater than a space shuttle's technology. It's crazy, right?
Crazy, bro. Yeah, it's crazy. Uh,
So what what do you like to eat on your own time? What kind of foods do you like?
bro. Just got married, by the way. You
Oh,
know,
congratulations, man. I wanted to ask you about that too.
thanks, man. Put a ring on her. She put a ring on me, so it's official. All that stuff. At the ceremony, it's in the paper. It's on paper. All that stuff. But shout out to Jean, my wife. Um, she is She is Japanese Korean, born in Hawaii but grew up in LA. So just in her experiences alone, the food's fire, man. And then just for lunch today, my favorite thing for us, I think I love it even more than she does, but I love sort of the cross culture that we do between Sam and goikung, which are summer rolls.
Mhm.
And Sam is basically the Korean barbecue.
Mm.
You have the banchan, but opposed to rice paper, you wrap it in a big leaf of lettuce and then sesame leaf and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then goikung, which is summer rolls, will have a similar layout, but opposed to all that stuff, you do herbs, rice, lettuce, some sort of meat, and you wrap it with rice paper. So we do a little cross culture of the both. So we do Sam with rice paper,
Damn.
which is super dope, man. It's
Sounds so good.
yeah.
Where did you meet your wife?
She's from LA, and then um I go down to LA a lot for like events and stuff, and she was mutual friends with my chef buddies, and we just kind of started talking, hanging out at a party, and you know, I said some smooth things, and she responded. I think for a full year we had a long distance relationship.
Mhm.
I think a little bit over a year, and then in efforts um, to maintain our relationship, I confessed my love for my wife or my then girlfriend, and then we made it a point to move in together. And I think as of today, not as of today, but as of March, we hit the 4-year mark. So
Congrats.
yeah,
Congrats, man.
thanks,
And
man.
she moved up to Oakland.
Correct. She moved here to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
What's her experience and the difference between Oakland and LA?
She, you know, so we don't explore Oakland as much. Mainly in the hood areas and other places I hung out and grew up with. She didn't get the full experience of that until um, I took Here magazine to through a tour through Oakland, and I went to a sandwich shop called Balea, and that's on I believe it's on I think it's on East 12th and then 21st 20th Ave. And in that intersection there on that block, the first comment she's seen, I mean, the first comment that came out of her mouth, she's like, "There's so many prostitutes in broad daylight." And that's the first time my wife saw that neighborhood as well too, and she was all like, "Wow, this is worse than Compton. Potholes everywhere, daylight prostitution, drug dealing in the daytime." I'm not trying to over exaggerate it. Maybe that's just a bad day that we went on,
No, I've been to that pocket. It's yeah,
or
you're not
like a
exaggerating.
Tuesday afternoon. And my response to them was, "This was way better than it was in the '90s when I was
Mm.
growing up." So I think in her experience, what she thought of the Bay Area was actually just San Francisco and the Ferry Building. You see what I'm saying? And for those of you who don't know, the Ferry Building is like this touristy spot, decked out on the pier, where there's a bunch of like high spend, high luxury businesses.
We thought the Bay Area food scene was a slanted door.
Yeah, I thought the Bay Area flu seems to slanted door, so she didn't know all about that.
Yeah.
And I think as we got to know each other more, I think if anything, that kind of like circled back to my story and growing up, and her understanding sort of my pathway to who I am today. So it's not that I'm embarrassed in any sense, any means, but I think it's for her, it was very fulfilling and meaningful to understand where her husband comes from and
What
the story aspect of it.
what did you think about doing when you were growing up? You're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to college or I'm gonna play football." I mean, what was going through your mind?
Like real talk, the way because my parents are both laborers.
Yeah.
Ever since I was little, I would say coming up to my high school years, my parents were gearing me up to be, to work in a warehouse. Like they're already gearing me up to like. My mom was a seamstress. She was already gearing me up to go work, you know, with her in her seamstress factory.
Damn.
And my father was a fishmonger. He didn't want me to do that, but I think the opportunity was there if needed. Um, just to give you some context, like in high school, I was really bad, like really bad. Like all my homies now are either locked up or dead. If they're not locked up or dead, they're at least they have
Right.
families. It's either one of the three, you know. Like I rode with some. I don't want to say they're bad people. It's just that's what Oakland was.
Right.
That's how everyone existed. Like and I don't want to get too much into that, respectfully. Um, but my parents were already gearing me up to be a laborer, and the fact that I wanted to go to culinary school, my mom's mind melted. She didn't think I was capable because, in essence, they don't think themselves of being capable of
So wait,
dream.
culinary school was like way beyond what they thought you should have been deserved that you deserve to do.
It's not something that I deserve to do, but they couldn't fathom that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the sort of the way I grew up is that if you got a job, it's good enough. And you got to remember, like it's sort of a poor mentality. When you're poor, you don't dream,
Yeah.
man. You just don't. Um, and I think that's sort of a context where I was coming from, and I'm not mad at my parents for it. It's just um,
That's what it is. What it is.
it is what it is, and I think I'm very blessed for my parents to have raised me. Absolutely, right? Feed me, be there for me, all that stuff in the capacity they were able to give. But it was really the people in my community who gave me that extra push. My basketball coaches, my mentors, my teachers. So given that sort of context, I was actually in honors classes in high school.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So I took AP physics in high school. I was in honors English and history, all that stuff. But still, given that, like, I don't think it makes me a great writer or a great speaker. And, I had something, right? And kind of sort of adding to that, my parents weren't expecting me to do much coming out of high school. And given the fact that I was locked up in I got locked up in junior year, and I was out of high school my whole entire junior year
Oh
because my
sh-
dad kicked me out of the house. Yet I still graduated with a 3.2 because when you're in honors classes,
Made
uh,
up for it.
yeah, because a D counts as a C counts as a B, and a B counts as an A, and so forth, right?
Yeah. The weighted GPA.
Yeah, weighted GPA. So I think it's one of those things where um, I felt that if I guess given my circumstances, it really gave context to the person I am today, where I can be articulate and then be a little bit rough around the edges still.
But what did you want to do? I mean, up until you made a decision in culinary school, you must have had thought, hey, when I get out of this, you know, y- period in my life, I want to do something beyond it. Or did you not have any sort of dreams?
So in high school, I think the thing that changed my life in high school was I somebody passed a book along to me called Alchemist,
Hmm.
right? And I think for most people, for all people who read it, actually, that's where if you never dreamt before, that book will encourage you to dream.
Absolutely.
That book Alchemist, I think I read it like in ninth grade, 10th grade, and I think it illustrated a world for me beyond my own, beyond the city that I came from, and just creating chapters, adding chapters to the book of my life in another place. And I think the thing that I thought that would take me to those sort of places was cooking. Because I think my understanding of cooking in that sort of meaning beyond my mom's kitchen was seeing things on Food Network. These chefs with these built up resumes that they traveled the world and came back and opened a restaurant. It's such a romantic narrative, and I think in some essence, um, that's sort of what I wanted. I wanted to be able to live the life that my parents didn't live.
Okay, so this was an early awareness that you wanted to get into food because of the Food Network, the chefs that were sort of resumes stacked, and you're like, okay, this is a way to get out.
In addition to that, I've always watched my mom cooked. I really loved cooking with my mom. All of my uncles, my dad's friends included, who were successful entrepreneurs. Every single one of them had a restaurant,
Mm.
and in their in their Claiborne suits and their Vietnamese in their brown loafers, with no socks. Like, to me, that was my in my immediate family. That was my pinnacle of success because I saw success from them, and I thought that was the way to go. Um, and I think that was just embedded in me early because that's what I saw. But as I got into high school, I think it got more enamored, understanding that you didn't have there weren't just restaurant owners, but there were restaurant chefs. So that narrative kind of grew with me every year in high school. And I would cook my homeboys. We like go to Safeway, at 2 in the morning, get a bunch of chicken and barbecue. After we were out partying all night, whatever it is. And then we would go back to our house. And so I did that all throughout high school, and I just love to cook. So coming out of high school, I was very convinced that that was my calling because I've always thought about it.
And then you decided to go to chef school, culinary school. And
By the way, my culinary school was shut down because of fraud. It's super fucked up, right? Like,
but did you
so
finish the program?
I did.
Yeah. But later on, it was shut down because of fraud.
Um, I think everyone in my class who paid for their tuition, a lot of them got their money back.
Oh shit! Did you
Yeah,
get your money back?
no,
Yeah.
because I think it's unfair because I think at the time I think the lawsuit came about, I think when I was a GM at Saul's.
Got
And
it.
being a GM at Saul's at 23, 24, I was doing okay. Um, so they didn't give me my money back, unfortunately.
Culinary school to me is sort of like film school, right? Any sort of like people can go. Anybody can sort of go to film school or culinary school. Not every culinary school or not every film school, but you could basically learn it, right? But when you say 90% of people that go to film school or culinary school or any type of school that deals with, arts don't reach where they need to go, right? And then coming from your background, going through culinary training, how the fuck did you in your mind go, I'm going to get to that place? Or was it something that you just kind of pieced together along the way? Because being put on the map is a very difficult thing, right? It's just a very, in any kind of art practice, very difficult. So
so,
how did you know that you were going to be able in your head to get there? Or was it just, you just kept doing things and you got there?
I think this is the way I think about things is that, you could tell me if I stand at a hoop and I shoot it 10 times
Yeah.
that I'll probably will make it 2 out of 10 times, right? But that's because you're telling me that. I'm the kid that would break in afterwards at night and I'll shoot 100 hoops until I make all 10 baskets. Do you see what I'm saying? I think that's the way you got to look at the world. Like if someone puts a statistic on me, you know, that makes me amp up even harder. So that way, the 1% that I have would be at the, I'll nail it eventually after like a million shots or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
I do.
like I think it's all about, and I think that's what people call determination.
Yeah.
I like to reference E40 a lot. E40's been in the game. That's we call him, the governor here around here. He's the true governor around here. And the thing was that he was so determined and dedicated to do what he wanted to do and the things that he envisioned that he was in the industry. I think what 30, 40 years now.
Can you tell us who E40 is for people who don't know?
If you don't know who E40 is, you should not be watching this podcast. I'm sorry, man. Like, just like my aunties know who E40 is. Come on, man. Like, Jesus.
There are, believe it or not, there are Vietnamese kids that are listening to this stuff in Vietnam in English, and they speak perfect English, and they were born, you know.
No, 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 no. I'm gonna stop you there, bro. I visited my cousin.
Yeah,
I visited my cousin on Phu Quoc Island back in, what was it, 2012. No, no, before that. It was 2009, right?
yeah.
And we pull up to her house, in Vietnam, especially on Phu Quoc Island, which is like one of the small islands in Vietnam. They don't have front doors. They just have like this big walkway into like this railroad style like apartment loft thing sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know? And you know what the first thing she was slapping? She had on blast. And this is 2012 in Phu Quoc, before they renovated, She was playing Keisha Cole, bro, like
Wow.
super loud. Super loud.
Keisha Cole and E40 is like, for all it's generations apart from each other, right?
Yes, and also considering Keisha Cole's from Oakland too. So I was like, no way she ain't playing Keisha Cole. And I think I not to I'm not trying to avoid from answering that question at all, but I just want to give some context is that I'm very proud of the Vietnamese economy on the young people, young generation. I think it's over 60% now,
Mhm.
where Vietnam's population is under 30 years old.
Yeah.
So they're very online. I think they're very hip hop, right? I feel like Vietnam's going to be the new next South Korea, bro.
100. We
Like
we
we'll
talk about
call.
that all the time on the show. I wanted to surpass the Korean. I'll put it out there. I say that all the time from
It will. It
from
will. It's not too far off, bro. It's
our
not too far
film.
off at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we it's our time. Our
Bro,
time.
check this out. On my Shopify store, right? Both of the apps that I have from my Shopify store that I use religiously to make it look nice and all, it's based in Vietnam, bro. I was like,
Mhm.
no way. Like, I think the tech sector is blooming, the music sector, the art sector, the hip hop culture is fire right now in Vietnam too.
Crypto is huge. Cryptocurrency is huge in Vietnam. I have a woman that I don't know if you fuck with crypto, but do you,
Bro, I'm on Doggy Coin. We've been winning this week, bro. Winning this week, bro. I think yesterday hit 40 cents, man.
so you trade on Binance, right?
Yep.
Or okay, so I reached out to some people in Vietnam and I was like, I'm looking for a crypto, somebody who can explain the shit in Vietnamese, right? Because I
Yeah.
do podcasts in Vietnamese. One of my boys said, yeah, meet this, brother named Robert, right? So Robert and I talked, but Robert's from Australia. We talked and I was like, I want my mom to understand crypto from
Yeah.
native language, right?
Yep.
And so Robert's like, I got this person. You ever heard of Binance? I was like, what the fuck? She runs Binance in Vietnam.
Holy shit, bro.
Yeah. So she's coming on. I have a pre-interview with her on Sunday. But yeah, so I'm so fucking
So
excited. Yeah. Anyway,
good.
Vietnam
I
is
think I think I think Vietnam's blowing up, man. Like real
blowing
talk.
the fuck up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. Chew, man. We're gonna talk about this later.
Yeah, absolutely, bro.
Yeah, I was deep in crypto in 2017 with me and my crew. We'll get into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. So all right, so let's talk about Top Chef because we're like
Yes.
we're an hour in, and
Deep in it. We're deep in it.
I want to hear how you I want to hear how people get into that because is it like an open casting call? Like how does it work? Oh, but you still got to answer the E40 question in a bit, but if you want to do that now or I can't let that go.
E4, let's answer E40 one. So E40 is a local Bay Area rapper that has connections with a lot of the legendary rappers in the industry. Like people like Tupac was good friends. But yeah, I would say he's one of the forefathers of hip hop,
Mhm.
uh, not just here in the Bay Area, but in the United States.
West Coast rap.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Top Chef.
Yes, ask away.
Okay, so what is it? An open casting call that you got the word on? How did you get into that show?
Um, I think I got at the time I was friends with this dude named Ryan Scott. Ryan Scott was on like season 4 or something like that, and he was an alumni. And we did some projects together, and he had whispered to me, he's like, "Yo, you should apply for Top Chef." I applied for Top Chef, and at that time, I had some pretty decent. I had a pretty decent culinary resume. I had worked in um, a few fine dining establishments, both here in the Bay Area and in New York. And I think just through those connections and working for those sort of quote unquote big names, um, in addition to my interview and like my personality, because they do interview, if your resume looks good, they do like a video phone call
Mm.
interview. I got on. No one ever gets on for your first submission. Um, but if they call, and if you go far enough, if you go to the point where they give you like a physical interview, they'll invite you back next year. And that's exactly what happened. I went pretty deep and pretty far into the interviews the first year I submitted, and then the following year they asked me to come back. And that's a fairly rare thing to happen because some people apply for like 6, 7 years
Oh shit.
before they even like get called on. So I have no idea. I always make a joke out of it. I'm all like, I guess this year is dry with Asian chefs, So I filled up that one spot, just to make a joke. But I have no idea. If I did know, I would ask you to advertise for me, so that way I can start charging people. You know what I mean? To
For
kind of vet them and advise them through the process.
shit. So that process is not very well like documented or well known. It's not like a protocol or a sort of thing that you can understand and codify.
I think the thing with media is that I think the producers are probably always changing. I think it's also dependent on the political climate. I think each year they're trying to find a new narrative, and I don't think it's definitive on what those things are, and because there's so many factors. Things like what city are they going to film in next? What's going to be a highlight theme of that season? Stuff like that. All those things come into play, and that needs to be reflective of the cast that they're going to bring in. So I don't think there's a guarantee because you never know what's going to happen or what new variables are going to come into play. I think that's one of the things about live reality TV. It can't be planned in that sort of way.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
Thanks, man.
Didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get to audition and you get approved to get onto the show, but so what's the sort of like the next steps that happen?
So we do a few interviewing processes, and then if you get approved and you pass those video interview rounds, they fly you in. You meet with the producers,
They fly
and
you into what city?
it depends. It's usually LA because their S studios are based in LA. You fly in. It's super stricken off. It's like CIA, FBI status. They escort you everywhere. They lock you in your room. You can't go anywhere else because there's other potential cast members in that same hotel. So we're all super blocked off. And then if you make it, you get a phone call. I think it's as simple as that. Um, but and the day I made it, I was super stoked. I didn't care if I won or not. Just to be included in that sort of cast with all these like top rated chefs was super dope. Do you want me to tell you about the experience, or should I wait?
No, no, no. I would love that. This is my next question.
Yeah. Um, so the thing for me was that wow, I get this vacation. It's unpaid, but it's this 2 month vacation to cook and hang out in a new city. So I was all about it. In addition to that, by me getting onto the show, I was just super excited that I had an opportunity to tell my narrative on national TV.
Right.
And I didn't understand after the fact that Top Chef, it doesn't just air nationally, it's international. It airs in every other country because it's that
Wow.
big now.
Mhm.
It wasn't after the fact where I started getting, people would hit me up from other different countries and be like, "Oh, I love your story. I'm Vietnamese from Australia, or Vietnamese from like Germany and Denmark. I loved you on the show, blah blah blah." So for me, that was my highlight that I felt most proud about, more than winning one competition or I did a dish game. Fuck all that shit. Like
Yeah.
that shit goes.
Yeah.
I felt so proud to represent as a Vietnamese American or as a Vietnamese person, looking the way I look, I could break those narratives of what TV has given people what an Asian man is supposed to look like, what an Asian man is supposed to talk like, you know, and what experiences an Asian man goes through. So, you know, for me, that will always be fulfilling, you know. In addition to that, they put us up in a fat house. The refrigerator was, you know, sponsored by Whole Foods. I told you I grew up hungry, right? I I was the one asking for hella shit, always eating in the fridge, in the middle, and I don't give a fuck, you know, like I was eating. All the other chefs were like, "Fuck, I'm stressing. You know, I need to figure out what I'm gonna do in my next court." I'm not hating on them. It's just they were really in their own stuff. I was just eating most of the time.
What city were you in?
Denver, Denver. So it was like it was the Colorado season. So we were in Denver, we were in Telluride, we were in Aspen, kind of everything in between.
What kind of control does the producer have on the narrative? Like for real? Or is it a lot of shit that's happening organically?
It's organic, but to a certain extent, they. By the way, you know, editing is a fucking powerful ass tool. You know,
Yeah.
it can make you seem that you say stuff because context is important.
Everything. Context is
Because
everything.
you are saying it at the end of the day, but if you don't, you know, if you cut off the other half of
Right.
what you actually said,
Totally different
they
meaning.
may just highlight the sarcastic part, and it may sound like you're being a dick, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the thing is, I think the fact that I come from Oakland and the way I grew up, you know, I think the thing for me was that I didn't have that sort of fear. I didn't talk shit about people like that. They would always ask me about or suggest that certain people said certain things about me, and I'm all like, you know, I could give a fuck. I'm from Oakland. You got something to say, you say it to my face, homie. Like it's right here. It's all good. It's all gravy. You know, and I think that's the sort of tone I kept on giving out. And because I was smiley all the time, and you know, I didn't seek to confront because I wasn't insecure in that sort of way. And if you saw it, you know, the way they edited me was I was smiley all the time and I was
Mhm.
happy
Yeah.
because that's all I gave them, you know. But not mad at them in any sense. It's just the way I dealt with the show. Other people deal with it differently. But yeah, you know, I felt great about how I conducted myself on the show, both in the competition and both during the interviews. Just know this too. You know, we would work 6 days straight. If we filmed a competition or filmed cooking, that would be like a 10-hour, 12-hour day. And then the following day, we have to go into the studio, into the blue room to kind of like do voiceovers and talk about our opinions. And while we're waiting, they put us in a alcohol sponsored room with security so we can't leave. So eventually, because we're bored as fuck,
Drink.
people pick up and drink. And then when they drink, they immediately would go into the room and they would talk. So a lot of people who are talking on screen are talking with loose tongues. You know what I mean?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Fucking crazy. I was on a reality show for a brief second in the 90s, but
What? What is that?
I'm not gonna talk about that shit. We'll talk about it off screen.
Oh
Never said that. But
my god.
it was back in the 90s.
I love it.
That dates me, man. I got 10 years on you.
It's all
Um,
good, bro. Asian or raisin. Yeah.
how has it changed your life?
I think this is a real thing. Some people on reality TV, coming off of it, they really get tuned into what the public says about them. And I've been fortunate enough where the public hasn't antagonized me in that sort of sense. If anything, they were in my corner. Um, but I would say with those sort of blessings, I've took the opportunity for exposure, and I try to leverage it to my opportunities and my brand, and I did.
Yeah.
And I understood from the very beginning the fact that I made it on the show was good enough for me. Other people were really hard on themselves that they didn't win. Just for transparency, I didn't win,
Right,
but
right.
I had a great time.
Yeah. It's a great leveraging point.
Yeah, you know. So immediately coming off the show, you know, quoting E40, slow feet don't eat. I took my opportunity. I approached brands to do collaborations. I did a sponsored traveling dinner series pop up, and I would pop up in different places, kind of like all over the country. I had a do you know what Surf Air is?
No. Surf
It,
Air?
yeah, it's a private jet airline. I had a private jet airline sponsorship. I had a sponsorship. I had a brand ambassadorship with Whole Foods. So I took my shit real quick before anything, and I lined my shit up. I learned how to do a deck. I learned how to do a pitch deck. Um, Bossed up my website. Try to gear up my social media. I think my social media. I came out late with that. I haven't really been focusing on my social media. I've only started like 3 4 years ago, like three maybe 2 years ago. But I bossed all those things up. And then I was trying to find opportunities to work with brands who helped highlighted my story and gave me opportunity to do either media content or some sort of advisory work, specifically being around
Okay.
not
So
just Asian American but Vietnamese.
yeah, so the episodes air and you finish the show. Basically, how much time goes on till you can collect the rain that's coming down? Like, how does it
Oh,
work?
great point. Great point. So I can't say anything. So we finished filming in July. About July, I think, yeah, around July, and they don't announce until I think for our season it was around Christmas. So it's about 5 to 6 months.
They don't
So
announce what? They don't announce the show is coming out, or they don't
they
announce.
don't announce the cast that's coming out.
Okay, for the next.
So for my leverage to be able to go to brands and say, "Hey, I was on Top Chef," I can't say that until December. See what I'm saying? So I had like 5 months to gear up all my stuff, line up
But who
all my.
taught you that? Who made you understand that you needed to gather all that shit and get it ready?
I think I think if I had any exposure to like hustle and bustle at all, I mean, like, I think that's a great question. I have no fucking idea. I think it's the books I read, you know, um,
Right? I mean, like, I wouldn't have thought of that. I'm like, okay, I'm on a show, cool. I get off the show and I'm like, I slide back into my own old existence. Who fucking lines up this shit and goes, all right, I'm gonna put this all together and get ready to collect the rain that's about to come down in December. Like that's some bow win shit. That's how he thinks.
you know what I think? I think it's probably, um, I guess working in restaurants, I've always seen entrepreneurship from talking to investors and all that stuff. And I think I would sit down and pick their brain. They would give me advice on how to structure things. They'll teach me how to like think outside the box. I think in addition to my parents being resourceful, I think it's a bunch of different things.
Mm.
Reading books about entrepreneurs, stuff like that. Um, yeah, I think it's just trying to, and just for the record, like um uh, in that sort of moment coming off a top chef, I wasn't ball I wasn't in a good financial place. I was just all right. I was barely making it at that time. Right before I got into top chef, I was doing pop-ups, and I had some savings because going to my pop-up years and doing my pop-ups, I went broke. And while being broke, yeah, I was broke, bro, because
Wait,
pop-ups
wait.
don't make money.
You
Pop-ups don't make money, bro.
So wait a minute. You saved up money to do pop-ups and then you lost money at the end of that run.
Yep. And I understood that because I knew that I wasn't thinking about doing pop-ups as making money. I was thinking of pop-ups as my marketing expense, if you will. Is that if I put it out there enough, something would catch. And Top Chef caught. San Francisco Rising Star caught. They gave me a Rising Star.
Hmm.
And if you look at the class of Rising Star chefs, bro, they're like the nation's top chefs, and I got included in that class, and I'm forever grateful for that.
Right, right, right.
So, like, for me, being in debt, but I was able to catch those things
Yeah.
to go, and those things are the anchor of my brand now today and what I'm
Yeah.
doing today.
But did you calculate that? Did you know that at the time? Like when you were doing the pop-ups? Because pop-ups, you're like, okay, well, people pay money. I make some money. There's some ROI there. But then at the end of it, you lost money and you're like, okay, fuck it. I'm gonna just chalk it up to marketing and my branding.
I don't think it was, and I think I told you this before, was that, through high school, my parents were gearing me up to be a laborer. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if it was calculated, but I think more so it was sort of a desperation because for me, it was either this or this, you know? And in addition to that, people, I've always thought about going back to be somebody else's chef for another restaurant. For me, that wasn't an option because I felt that my mental health space in working in a restaurant for being a restaurant chef for another person, I was pulling 14, 15-hour days, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. And for me, that just didn't jive well with me. You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel like I could be myself. I felt like I was being exploited. And I'm not blaming the restaurant owners by any means or any sense, but it's just a systematic issue for me. Like you know, I could only do that for so long. That's a young man's game, and then at that time, I already hit 30. I was gonna go into my 30s and 40s working 15, 16-hour days. That's ridiculous. That's crazy. It's unreasonable. So I think the reason why I went that hard, went that far, because I don't feel like I had any other option. You know, and I think the worst case scenario, which I've never done, or never considered doing was that I could go and hang out with my old homies, and do bad things,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I think in my early chef career, I think from like my probably like my mid 20s to my 30s, like I think there was a moment where I moved in with my homies and there was consistently codeine, promethazine, and coke on the table, and for me, the moment that I drew the line, me being a restaurant chef, living at that time I was living in East Oakland. Um, I think it was off of 13th Ave and East 22nd. Super sketchy house, but it was cheap rent. My homies were there; they'd been there for a long time. The moment where I drew the line was when a few of my friends who had search warrants out for them moved in with us temporarily to live with us. I'm like, I can't do that, bro. Like, we can't get raided. When I'm working for a restaurant. When I'm this restaurant chef. It ain't.
That's
So
some
that's I think
crazy shit.
yeah. So that's the moment where I had to move out and then just be cool with everything and really put both feet in to make sure that I'm completely have graduated and moved on from those life experiences. It's
But
either go live with my homies and be like them and do what they did, or go and be a laborer with my parents. And I felt that, I don't think my parents were dismissing my intelligence or my innate abilities to do other things. I think they were just thinking on pure survival, but I felt like I had so much to offer, so much to articulate, so much to do that I was willing to be that desperate and go towards those sort of measures to find opportunity for
yeah,
myself.
to cut yourself off the old ways, because I can't imagine like old homies calling you up and be like, "Yo, man, you changed. Like, why did
All
you?"
the time, all
Right?
the time, all the time. And I think with every new year that I'm practicing writing and reading and speaking, when I talk to them, like, wow, they're like, wow, you sound so different now. You sound so different now. But I find absolute pride in that. Where if I go to when I go to like in a inner urban school, and I talk to
Fit
junior high
right in.
school kids or like high school kids, and they see that I'm an example of success, looking the way that I do, I feel like I give them hope. Where it shows them that there is a way to be yourself and who you are, and if you look like me, or even if your dad looks like me, it doesn't mean you're doomed. You know.
Yeah. This whole idea of code switching is.
Oh yeah, for sure. I,
So
I learned I learned that shit early on. Yeah.
but I feel like when I get called out for it, like for participating in that sort of action, it's kind of unfair because I grew up there. That's
Yeah.
part of me, right?
Yeah.
So do I need to always talk like that? Do I need to always behave that way? Do I always need to wear a hoodie and you no, I could be whatever the fuck I want at any time I want, right?
So for me, it was the opposite. For me, it was. that I guess sort of ebonics or the slang that I use, that was me who I really was. Uh, I didn't know how to speak outside of that. I had to learn how to code switch so when a cop pulled you over, you wouldn't go to jail.
Mhm.
Oh, better believe it, bro. I got my ass beat by Santa Clara police. Real talk. I'm putting you guys on blast right now. Real talk. And that happened in my youth, in my adolescence, I guess, my mid to late teens. And it was just over my friends giving cops attitudes, and uh, I think it's kind of gray if it was invoked or not. But I think coming out of that experience, I had to learn how to code switch, because whether the cop was a fair person or not, I wanted to know how to navigate through his or her prejudices so I don't go to jail, or I don't get my ass beat, or I don't get profiled as somebody else they thought who was a criminal. And that's a real thing. Every person of color, of youth, navigates it. And this is me as a lighter skinned man, you
Yeah.
know, not even black yet. And I talk to my black homies all the time, where when I'm out with them, they get targeted way before I am.
Yeah. It's true. Real.
Man. So I think it's one of the things where it's like code switching, I never thought of it as a bad thing. I thought it was a mechanism for survival. If I didn't code switch, you know, for my job interviews, when I was 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, I wouldn't have got hired. Real talk.
Yeah, and I think we all in different sort of forms code switch. We all sort of, it's subtle, and it's part of life. We
No
have.
matter, no matter, no matter who says they don't code switch, everybody does. I've seen all of my homeboys code switch when they talk to their grandma and their mom. All of a sudden, so bro, what's good? Blah, blah, you, yee, whatever, right? And it's like, hey mom, how you doing? Okay, mom. Like everybody code switch. Husband code switch with their wives,
Yeah.
vice versa. People code switch with their puppies. I do,
Yes.
like, and it's not about being fake or real. I just think it's a reflection of the prejudiced world that we live in. That's what I think when you're talking about code switching between people, you know?
That that is partly why I have tattoos, but hidden tattoos, and I am tempted all the time for more visible stuff like you.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult for me to kind of like, it's very energy consuming to sort of like explain things and walk into environments and having to make people think. I'm just not built that way to have people think that, okay, well, what you see is not really what you're getting.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you're really into that, it seems.
I don't know if I'm into that. I don't know. Does it get me, do I get excited
Yeah, let
given
me
the
take that back. I didn't mean it. You're accepting of that way that people sort of receive the visuals, and then you're like, no, 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 I'm not that. I'm not that person, or I am that person, but I'm gonna explain, and the energy to articulate who you are is abundant in you.
I think if anything, I'm a big fan of Tupac. It's Tupac's spirit. Um, I think what Tupac taught me um, is that to own your identity. You are who you are, and I'm connected to you, whether you're white, black, Asian, whatever, a police officer or a teacher. I am a fruition of my previous generation, no matter what community you come from.
Yeah,
I'm the byproduct of you guys. And whether you like it or not, I'm going to tell you who I am and what my truth is, because it's the previous generation that created us. We are the result of them, no matter how you want to put that. So I think for me, it's more about not just finding the opportunity or feeling the responsibility to convince people. I feel like I'm just kind of speaking my truth, and really owning who I am. And I guess if I'm fighting anything, I'm fighting in my place to exist and to tell my story and to say that, I deserve to stand right next to you, whether you're in a business suit or not.
Yeah. How does it feel going to Vietnam for you?
Um, it's, I think my most recent trip was pre-pandemic, obviously.
You just lit up when I asked you that. You're like, ah,
I love Vietnam. I think the people are, I think there's a lot of love there. I feel like people are very open. I think people here in the United States, they have this thing about space and bubble. People in Vietnam don't. So when I walk through the airport in Vietnam, where they think I'm like an American rapper or Japanese Korean rapper or something, I don't know. Like little kids and people come up to me and they touch my hands, and they ask me a bunch of questions and stuff. And I think the opposite is true too as well too, where there's people suffering and they'll come and tug my shirt and there'll be like 30 other kids behind them, asking for $1. So I think it's bittersweet for me, because you see the suffering, but at the same time you see the love and the warmth. And these are people who I don't know; these are complete strangers. And I think that's one of the things that I found very joyful, not just in cooking, not just in speaking or do media projects where people watch films or whatever, but just having the innate ability to, just by your presence, just by you showing up, just by you smiling at somebody, you're able to change a person's day like that. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. Just to kind of pivot back, that's one of the many reasons why I volunteered and worked with incarcerated men for I think about 2 years.
right.
Committed every Monday to be there 7 a.m. in the morning, and just to be very transparent, going to prison even as a volunteer is a very emotionally rough. Um, walking through the yard, seeing all the things that's happening, dealing with the security guards. You know, it's all stuff that I, I would think that you would have to have a very thick skin to navigate. But once again, even navigating through that, showing up in that classroom, just the fact that I'm there, those men just they're like, I waited all week just to kind of like see you and hang out and cook food. Same thing with those kids. They'd never seen me before. Like I'd show up and they're touching my tattoos and they're just excited. Like stuff like that. I think I try to have and maintain my human element as a
Right.
person,
Right.
opposed to erase it. So
When you're in Vietnam, you've been back to Phu Quoc, yes?
all the fucking time, fucking
So
love food.
how has it changed from the stories in your mom and dad's mind to
Yeah.
what you're witnessing? Because I think it's now a very resorty kind of place, right?
But most recently, that's a great question. But I think I caught a glimpse of what my parents came from in '96. In '96, I was 11 years old. In '96, they didn't have an airport. They had like a rock, like literally rock dirt runway for a small jet, a propeller jet, not even like a fancy jet, like a propeller, like old school jet. And landing down there in my dad's village, he lived in one of the alleyway residences by the market, which is where the poorer area is. And I remember that they only had one light bulb for like a village of or a residence area for maybe like 10 families.
Yeah.
Now, that's the only electricity they had was one light bulb for a public bathroom. And I remember how amazing it was when you didn't have any electricity and the stars would come out and the moon would come out and it was bright enough so you can walk around the street. It was bright enough to light up the walkway. And as an 11-year-old, that shit fucking changed my life. Just
Mm.
understanding and seeing stuff like that. Seeing that there was a bigger world beyond like
The
city
hood.
walls, concrete, the hood. You know what I mean?
Wow. How big? How many people? What's the population of Phu Quoc?
Right now,
Yeah. I mean, back then.
I have no idea, but I tell you this: every time I go back, no matter where I walk, they know that I'm my dad's son
Oh wow. Not that big.
because I look like him, and because the tattoos, no one else on that island, I'm pretty sure even foreigners, like, they don't have as many tattoos as I have, looking like my dad's son, you know?
Do you
Um,
feel like there's this sort of island culture on Fukuoka? Because everyone in the world, there's this sort of this idea of island culture, right? Do
yeah,
you
bro.
feel like your wife's from Hawaii? Did
Yeah,
you feel? Do you feel like there's an island culture in Fukuoka?
absolutely, bro. Both sides of my family were both free divers. There's
Oh
just
shit!
in our family, if somebody gets sick, they're like, "Did you go to the ocean this week?" If you're not feeling good, you need to go see the ocean. So
Wow.
we're islanders for real, bro. You know, um, my mom's side of the family, they make mom as well too. So we're everything in the ocean is us. And I would definitely compare the people. Uh, Fukuoka is like Hawaii. There's the natives there who's been there for generations, and there's tourists. People coming there to find opportunity to make a buck off the economy. Fukuok's the same way. My parents were natives there. My parents, my lineage, were for sure natives there. Um, and I think there's a lot more complexities to Phu Quoc too. Not that it's just being Vietnamese, but I think 100 years plus back, Vietnam actually used to belong to Cambodia, so it was Khmer territory.
Oh,
My grandmother, I think, yeah, I think my great grandmother was my grandmother. My grandmother is of Khmer lineage, you know, so we're Viet, Chinese, Khmer, all the mix.
right.
Yeah.
You and I share. I could see it when I watch you and your mother interact. We share that, very much. But I have a very loving mother. Have you always had that good relationship with your mom?
I just want to make things very clear, like that movie about my mom, about my father, but that's basically a love letter to my mother. And pre that movie, she has never told me any of those things ever in my life. I don't know any of those things. The reason why I made that movie is because I wanted to find a way that my mom and dad would tell their stories to something, if not me. See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
My parents suffer from PTSD, man. That's a struggle to live with today. Like, just for example, I don't think people understand what PTSD is. Um, like my mother, she she um I would find treats, cookies, and candies tucked away in the most random places, like the bathroom. Because I think in her thinking, and this is very common for people who've been through war, is that they're scared that their food might be taken away from them. So they hide it in these crazy weird places.
Damn.
You know what I mean? Um, what's another thing? Um, my mom needs to know where everyone is. If I'm at work, she'll blow up my phone like a million times. This is me as an adult, like, out of the
Like
house.
last week,
And she'll tremble and cry if she can't get a hold
mind
of me.
you.
And
Yeah.
that's a war thing too. It's like you need to know where everyone is. I think I mentioned this earlier. My father growing up nailed all the windows shut. And that's like prison, bro. Like literally. He nailed I shit you not, he nailed the windows shut because he said he was afraid people might come in and hurt us. And though, you know, the very common saying with my father, and he said it in Vietnamese, is that, you know, why'd you leave the door open? Or no, we're not going to open the window because someone might come in here and slice our throats. And at that time, I'm maybe 5 or 6 years old. My sister's 9. You don't say stuff like that to a
You
kid.
don't.
So that's the thing about PTSD is that I have to struggle with my parents. They refuse to get um, I don't want to say refuse, but they don't understand how they've been scarred and affected
Yeah.
from a mental health sort of perspective. And I've always been struggling with them to have conversations with them, not just about their mental health, but about their experiences. And this is my first scratch at that. And I think we did an amazing job, my crew and myself. By the way, um, I was a partner in the media company that created that film, and I'm a co-executive producer as well too. So like in conjunction with myself and my team, we were able to get this all on film, you know, which was a huge blessing. But
Well, I tell you what, that piece, it was 30 minutes, it was tight, and it
yeah,
was very moving. It's very emotional,
yeah,
and you could feel it was very. If I thought it was another company that just showcased you. I didn't realize that you were
yeah,
behind the production. So
yeah.
great job on that.
But I think that was the only way that would have been possible because if it was a production company, my mom and dad would have been open.
Mm.
Guarantee it. Guarantee it. You know, guarantee it. So it's one of those things. Not that I don't mean to brag by any sense, but like we did it because we have to.
Right,
You
right.
know, there was no other way. You know, and that's the thing. It's like my relationship with my parents is still a struggle.
Oh, really?
It's just it's still communication's still very difficult. You know, um, it was very very hard for them. Would I ask them to ever do that again? No, but it was gratifying, I think, for us and our family because at least we have a story told about our family, and the fact that it's being celebrated is just extra. You know, I just want people to be really real because I want to be raw about it because I don't want people to think that everything is like happy Cinderella sort of story
Yeah.
because it's not. Because mental health, PTSD, the struggles of other mothers and fathers who are refugees, it doesn't end with a movie like that, you know? And I want to share that sort of narrative with other people who have parents like my own who have suffered the same thing, if not worse, you know?
What thank you for sharing that with about your parents.
Thanks.
Um
It's hard, but you know, at the end of the day, it's about owning our narratives. It's about being vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, I try my best to be factual because I don't want to misrepresent because we're talking about pain here and no one else in our space is offering that up, offering that pain.
right.
For me, it's a responsibility. You know what I mean? So,
What is your next steps? What is your ultimate dream to life?
I think it continues to change. I think, um, I find that I have an entrepreneur spirit and I get passionate about a lot of projects. Um, I think in the immediacy, I want to further establish myself in the food media space. It wasn't too long ago where I was fully funded by Visit Oakland to do a TV show on PBS. But however, as of March 2020, the day Gavin Newsom issued shelter in place, our funding got pulled from us because our funders are in the tourism space,
Mm.
understandably so. So I think it's one of those things where I very blessed continuously to have these opportunities blooming, but there's still a lot of work for me to do to get to the places where I want to go.
I I really don't like talking about politics on the show, but
Sure.
I still have to ask you, like, what was your opinion on what happened and transpired with the governor of California during that time period? Was
I
the right
think
decisions
I
made?
don't know. So I'm not a politician. I don't know how governors work, right? But I'm convinced that if we had a better president like Donald Trump, a lot of shit would have been a lot better for a lot of other people, in particular all the states.
Okay, so you're it's not really you don't think it was really about Newsom as much as it was higher up.
It could have been both.
Mhm.
It could have been both. I don't know, you know? I think I say this, and I think this is a fair criticism, right? As liberal as California is, California can absolutely do a better job for its fucking people.
Absolutely.
And
100 yeah.
I'm not talking about just Newsom, but just all the governors prior to that, you know? I and I'm just saying from what I know, I don't want to speak beyond it,
Yeah.
but Salesforce is a multi-billion dollar company. They built $1 billion public park in San Francisco. At the base of that $1 billion park, there's a homeless encampment of people suffering and doing opioids. That doesn't make sense to me. And I go by the old saying, fuck all the excuses, right? And the fish stinks from the head down. So it goes up to the mayor. The mayor goes up to the governor. And the governor goes up to, so, in actuality, my brother, like, I blame all of them. I don't want to say or even suggest the fact that I don't have faith in um, democracy. I think democracy is a beautiful idea. However, I think there's a lot of things we need to fix for people, citizens like yourself and myself, to participate in the right ways so we can be heard. And I think we're very, very far from that.
It's an
The
ongoing,
American,
yeah,
what's
it's
that?
an ongoing process, I think, democracy in the US.
Yeah, like I feel like the America that, you know, that had everyone from JFK to, and I'm not praising these people because I'm going to say Ronald Reagan and George Bush, but from the America that was JFK, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton, all the way up to Obama, to Trump, to Biden, those are all different Americas that we're all experiencing.
Yeah, that's a very
So,
good point.
you know what I mean? So it's like, it's hard for me as a person to blame one person. I feel like maybe it's a little bit of everyone's responsibility to kind of take care of shit, right? And that's why one of the reasons why, I'm such a big advocate for community and community services. That's why I donate my time. I serve on boards. I give my resources, my services away to nonprofit organizations here in Oakland, specifically Asian Health Services and Oakland Asian Cultural Center, because those are two institutions that I passionately care about. Real Foods Restores as well. Those are all institutions I really care about because they provide safe spaces for people. And without them, my life wouldn't have changed. And I feel like if other people who are able to give would do the same thing, and just giving resources, I think a lot can change. I think we can't just bank on the government. I think we have to also bank on our own community. You know what I mean?
You know, I hear you and I listen
Yeah.
to how involved you are with the community, and it it feels like Oakland has this sort of magical formative power on artists and the community, like Ryan Coogler, right?
Yeah.
There's people that are coming out of Oakland that do their thing, have this sort of other deeper understanding of community for whatever reason that is. Where does that come from?
I had this conversation. My wife had this conversation with me not too long ago, and she says, like, I think when we first dated, she didn't understand why I was doing so much. And literally, even though as an entrepreneur, I'm working 6 days a week, 7 days a week, whether it's on my phone or in front of the computer, whatever. Like, I'm always doing stuff, and a good chunk of that is community service. And I think in the beginning, she didn't understand why I was exhausting myself. And as she started to learn more about me, and as my stories go more public, and the personal stuff that I share with her, she started to understand this. She was like, I understand now. And the reason why you work so hard is because without these mentors, without these community services, without these people in your life who open the door for you, you wouldn't have had these opportunities. And I see that that's why you work so hard to pay it forward, to give it back to that other kid who may be in your same boat, if not worse. So it's not about, you say it's an understanding. For me, I call it ethics. I want to be able to sleep at night, bro. You know, it's kind of like, like, how would I go on with my job knowing that community center that helped me out shut down? I don't have a choice. I don't feel like I have a choice. And that's why I try to do the things that I do. I'm not Bill Gates. I'm not the Bill Gates Foundation. Um, but I do try to corral my resources. I think the thing that I'm really blessed about is um, there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies here in the Bay Area, and I'm very proud to say that from everyone from Airbnb to LinkedIn to Twitter to Whole Foods, they've approached me to ask how they should participate in helping the community out, and I'm very proud to say that I've had those conversations and helping them. Visit Oakland as well too. Like, to me, It's an ethics thing, more so than something to put on our resume. So
Well, though I really respect the work that you're doing both on your resume and on, in your private life with all of the philanthropic endeavors. And, I thank you.
well, let me make these things very clear. For me to qualify as a philanthropist, I need to I need to have M's, bro. I need to have millions. I'm not there yet.
I
But
think philanthropist just means that you love humanity, right? And you,
yeah, I just want to make that clear.
yeah,
Oh,
thank you so much for all the work that you're doing within our community, and the
thank-
kind of flavors that you are providing both figuratively and literally to the world that we live in today.
Thanks, bro. I'm trying, bro. Like I'm I don't have a map that I'm following. I'm just trying to figure it out. So, hopefully other people will jump in and help me figure it out together.
Yes, yes. I think you do have a lot of people, a lot of fans, friends of mine who know you are big fans of the work that you do. And so thank you again for coming on and speaking with me today and spending time with me. And hopefully we can catch up in the near future about the next project that you do.
Awesome, man. Thank you, Kenneth. This was super awesome to, be on here and listening to my story and narrative and all that stuff. By the way, you guys tell me what show you were on in the 90s. So, I'm following up with that.
I'll tell you right after this. Thank you. Thank you so much again.
Absolutely. Thanks, brother.
All right, man.